few years, and we've been working to do exactly this, to build this relationship of solidarity between First Nations people in Canada, resisting the most destructive project in history with the international community. And so I'm just going to start and back up a little bit and tell you a little bit more about the tar sands, for those of you who might not have heard about the world's most destructive project currently taking place in eastern Canada. So this is what the tar sands pit looks like. So we've basically reached the end of conventional oil, the stuff that comes out a bit more silky and smoother. We're now at the sort of scraping the bottom of the barrel, and in order to feed the world's energy needs, Canada is becoming a sacrifice zone, basically. So what happens is the top of the earth is basically stripped away in order to get to the sticky black substance called bitumen. It takes about 3 to 5 barrels of fresh water in order to turn this sticky substance into oil. It also takes huge amounts of energy, natural gas, in order to do that. And Canada has the world's second largest deposit of oil in the world now, after Saudi Arabia. So this is definitely something that is going to continue to grow in the future. And there are also other tar sands deposits around the planet in Congo, Brazzaville, Venezuela, Madagascar. And this is basically the test zone, developments of industry and technology that are happening in Canada are often rolled out around the rest of the world then. So you can see that what's left is just a toxic moonscape. So this is before Bill C-45 has gone through. This is what's happening in a country that is supposed to be, you know, one of the upholders of democracy and environmental laws, you know, green, sort of tree-hugging nation. So this is what it would have looked like before. This is the Athabasca region. It's pristine boreal forest, and it's a key carbon sink. It's often called the second lung of the planet, the Amazon being one of the others. And we often hear a lot about the deforestation of the Amazon, but we're not hearing so much about the boreal, which is key for stabilising global climate. And this is what it looks afterwards. It's absolutely horrific. When I went to see it, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It's literally Mordor, like it literally looks like that. So some of the, as well as the global impacts of this development, there are a lot of local impacts on the communities there. These are some of the fish that I've found just downstream from the tar sands. You see they've got lesions on them. That's from the bioaccumulation of the toxins in the water from the process where tar sands are refined. Often there are these large tailing ponds left after the process. These are huge, they're kilometres wide, and they're not being contained in any way. They often sit next to huge major water river systems without any way of protecting them from going into the main source of water that communities rely on. And so we're seeing that a lot of the community members are experiencing rare autoimmune diseases, cancers, and for Indigenous communities, being able to eat traditional foods, to collect berries and medicines is essential to, you know, the identity of being an Indigenous person. And those resources are no longer accessible. It's also very hard to find, you know, affordable food in a lot of these communities. A lot of that food is shipped in. So you're seeing that this is a community that are already being pushed into tough economic situation, historic economic. They're now also, you know, having their food security taken away from them. And so what was happening is that a lot of the communities were starting to see this and wanted to bring their concerns to the Canadian government, and it was falling on deaf ears. There was no interest from the Canadian media to hear about this. The doctor who first found the autoimmune diseases was, you know, it was called basically that it was a quack, that it was causing undue alarm to the community. And so, again, by a few chance sort of situations, we managed to meet some of the community members who were facing this. Just to bring it back to why this connects to us a little bit. So the climate impacts of this are enormous. So it's 3 to 5 times zero emissions than regular oil. There's enough natural gas every day to heat 3.2 million homes. So it's kind of like, it's energy madness. You're using like caviar to basically get spam. And it's, as I said, it's a huge deforestation rate. So as I mentioned, we met some community members who were trying to raise awareness about what was happening to the communities there, and some of the people who were starting to, wanted to oppose development and expansion of this. And in 2009, we were lucky enough to bring some community members over for the first sort of thing that kicked this off, which was the climate camp at Blackheath. Recognise some faces from there. And so what we wanted to do was to basically show the Canadian government that they were no longer going to get away with this, that the international community was watching, and that we were going to stand in support of these communities and make sure that everybody knew about what was going on in Canada, to amplify the concerns of these communities about what was happening with the extraction process. And so, as well as having this relationship with the Crown and the treaties, we also have this relationship with the corporations and the financial institutions that are doing the majority of the work here. And you have to understand that the tar sands is the biggest conglomeration of corporate power in history. So basically, everyone is in there, Exxon, everyone, all the larger oil giants. So basically, we have a responsibility to, being in London, being in the financial capital, to make sure that we put these companies on notice, that there's an international community now that is aware of the real impacts of tar sands. So this is another sort of defining moment of when we started to escalate things in order to make sure that we were creating space in the media for community voices to get out. This was during the Copenhagen negotiations, while Prime Minister Harper was arriving at the climate talks there. We went to the Canadian Embassy and dumped the flag in. It's just paint, safety first. And we also had a presence at the Trafalgar Square occupation that was happening there. So this really helped to internationalise what was happening in the tar sands. And I think, as Sylvia mentioned, there's a huge media blackout on this. So this meant that, the CBC was reporting on it, The Guardian, we were finally starting to get some of these stories out. So RIOTS, who are just around the corner, they're one of the largest investors in the tar sands, 7th largest. And what we wanted to do was to bring people over to the AGM there. A lot of what we do is to put corporations on notice and to bring community voices to the boardroom so that they confront the board and the CEO about what is happening with their investment. And a lot of community members are trying to push now for free, prior and informed consent. So the idea is that, Is that better? Yeah. Communities are asking for, all the money that goes through RBH should have the stipulation on it that those projects have gone through a process of consultation with those communities. And it's not happening with any of these projects there. So RBS is invested in the Enbridge pipeline project, which will take the oil along the west coast of Canada and eventually, once the Arctic melts, ship it over to China. And so we did some direct action, and there's some stuff with Climate Camp a few years ago. And this is what we've been pushing for non-stop, is to make sure that communities have the right to understand the real impacts of tar sands development on their territory, and to be able to have the right to say no. And Bill C-45 continues to further erode that ability of communities to say no to extraction on their project. So you can see what's happened with some sort of policies in place. That's just going to be rampant now. One of the other corporate culprits in there is BP. So British Petroleum they're sort of a newer company in the tar sands, but they've started to do in situ mining, which from the outside looks a bit more. There's a steam injection of water into the ground, which then pushes the bitumen out, and it completely defragments the forest, completely devastates the water table, and there's hundreds of leases now of in situ taking place on the territory of many communities, such as the Beaver Lake Cree, who are currently in litigation against the Canadian government as well. So we've been trying to put a lot of pressure on BP to make sure that, again, investors know the real risks associated with tar sands, and also to challenge some of the fact that, you know, BP is now sponsoring all of our institutions, and it's just not appropriate that they have the social license to operate and to make their brand look good, while at the meantime we know that they're devastating communities and they're devastating territories in Canada. So this is some of the actions that have been happening with other friends like Liberate Tate and Platform to try and get BP sponsorship taken at the arts. And we want to make sure that those voices, those community voices, are brought into our art spaces. So, you know, they're being heard in many different platforms. Another of the corporations that we've been looking at is Shell as well. So Shell has been operating in the tar sands the longest. They've been there for 55 years. And in that time, there's never been a cumulative impact assessment of the true impacts of all those tar sands projects on the environment. And now again, you'll see 45 has got rid of any process, will get rid of any processes that would in turn do that. So again, we're seeing that this is happening so rapidly. There's no monitoring, there's no real governance of any corporations in tar sands. So the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation are currently in legal battle to try and start the expansion of 2 new projects on their territory. And they have said that, you know, they are preparing to block the roads that go up to the tar sands in the summer. So we'll be standing in solidarity with them and watching them as that happens. That's from the Shell AGM this year. And this is Ariel, and she's from the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation. She's an incredible First Nations activist who we've been working with. And one of our principles as we work and as we build these campaigns is that our campaigns are always developed in consultation with community members to make sure that they are amplifying messages that they want, that they're supporting what happens at home with them, and that we use tactics that work with them. For instance, you know, often it's not the best tactic to do actions that damage property when at certain times when the community calls for that, because there is such a negative stereotype around First Nations communities that often peaceful and non-violent is the way to go. That's been a constant negotiation between the communities and the solidarity actions that have happened here. And we also have Ron there, who's from Aamjiwnaang, and Aamjiwnaang is one of the communities where tar sands are being refined to eventually bring them over to the UK. I'll talk about that in a little bit more. So constantly, the work that we've been doing has been to make sure all of these corporations are being made to be put on hold for their lack of consultation with communities, and again to really try and show what's happening in the tar sands. So yeah, there are, as well as I mentioned, we have these treaty connections to the UK, we have financial ties to the UK. There's also plans to start shipping tar sands oil to the UK as soon as the Keystone XL pipeline goes ahead.